The year is 1692. A small, remote corner of colonial Massachusetts is about to descend into a nightmare that would forever stain the conscience of a young nation. This was Salem Village, a community grappling with profound internal tensions, external threats, and a pervasive, suffocating atmosphere of religious extremism. It was here, in this fertile ground of fear and suspicion, that the seeds of hysteria would take root, blossoming into one of the most infamous episodes in American history. The Salem Witch Trials. This was not merely a local anomaly. It was a devastating indictment of a society consumed by its own rigid beliefs and the terrifying power of collective delusion. To truly comprehend the unfolding tragedy, one must understand the bedrock of Puritan society. The colonists of New England had fled persecution in England, seeking to establish a city upon a hill, a perfect, devout Christian commonwealth. Their lives were governed by an austere, literal interpretation of the Bible, which dictated every aspect of daily existence, from moral conduct to legal statutes. The world, in their view, was a constant battleground between God and the devil. Every misfortune, a crop failure, a sick child, an Indian raid, was often interpreted not as natural calamity, but as a direct intervention of Satan, actively working to undermine their holy experiment. This dualistic worldview provided a ready-made framework for understanding and condemning the inexplicable. Salem Village itself was a microcosm of broader colonial anxieties. It was an agricultural outpost, economically dependent on the more prosperous port town of Salem Town, yet constantly resentful of its perceived superiority. The village suffered from deep-seated factionalism and boundary disputes, bitter rivalries between families, and disputes over land and resources. The arrival of Reverend Samuel Parris, a rigid and somewhat unpopular minister, exacerbated these divisions, as his demanding nature and focus on eternal damnation further inflamed the community's already strained nerves. This internal strife created a volatile environment, ripe for scapegoating and the external projection of internal grievances. Beyond these internal pressures, the colony faced very real external threats. The constant menace of Native American attacks from the French, allied Wabanaki tribes along the frontier created a pervasive sense of insecurity and vulnerability. Many refugees from these brutal conflicts had fled to Salem Village, bringing with them stories of unimaginable horror and a deep-seated fear of the wilderness and its perceived pagan inhabitants. This ever-present danger further intensified the Puritan belief in a world under siege by dark forces, reinforcing their conviction that Satan's earthly agents were at work to destroy them. Adding to this combustible mix were the social expectations for women. Puritan society placed immense pressure on women to conform to strict roles, pious wives, diligent mothers, and subservient daughters. Any deviation from these norms, any unconventional behavior, or any expression of independence could be viewed with suspicion. Older, unmarried women, or those who possessed independent wealth, were particularly vulnerable to accusations. As they lay outside the strict patriarchal structure, this rigid societal framework, combined with the extreme religious fervor and pervasive anxieties, created a powder keg. All that was needed was a spark. That spark would come not from a grand political dispute, but from the quiet, domestic space of a minister's household. In the winter of 1692, strange afflictions began to manifest among a group of young girls. Their inexplicable symptoms, violent fits, contortions, blasphemous outbursts, would quickly transform private fear into public hysteria, tearing apart the fabric of Salem Village and exposing the brutal consequences of a community possessed by its own fear and unwavering belief in the literal reality of the devil. The quiet village was about to erupt into a crucible of terror. The terrifying events that would engulf Salem Village began subtly, within the household of Reverend Samuel Parris. His 9-year-old daughter, Betty Parris, and her 11-year-old cousin, Abigail Williams, began to exhibit peculiar and alarming behaviors in January 1692. They suffered from sudden, violent fits, inexplicable contortions of their limbs, agonized screams, and the utterance of strange, blasphemous sounds. They complained of being pricked by invisible pins, bitten by unseen teeth, and choked by unseen hands. These symptoms, baffling to contemporary medical understanding, quickly became a source of intense alarm and growing fear within the close-knit community. Initially, their afflictions were attributed to illness or unknown ailments. However, as the symptoms persisted and worsened, and as other young girls in the village began to exhibit similar behaviors, notably Anne Putnam, Jr., and Mercy Lewis, the local doctor, William Griggs, offered a grim diagnosis. The girls were suffering from the evil hand. In 17th-century Puritan New England, this diagnosis was unambiguous. It meant only one thing: witchcraft. The devil himself, through his human agents, was directly afflicting the young and vulnerable, attacking the very heart of the Puritan covenant. The afflicted girls' symptoms, though initially baffling, were not entirely without precedent. Historians have debated various modern medical explanations for their behavior, ranging from epilepsy, encephalitis, or even ergot poisoning, a fungus that grows on rye, causing hallucinations and convulsions, to psychological conditions stemming from the extreme stress of Puritan life. However, for the people of Salem, steeped in their literal interpretation of biblical teachings and a profound belief in the devil's active presence, these were not medical conditions. They were spiritual attacks, clear evidence of a demonic conspiracy at work. Under intense pressure from their families and the community to identify their tormentors, the girls began to name names. The first 3 accused were marginalized figures, easy targets for suspicion: Tituba, Reverend Parris's enslaved servant from Barbados; Sarah Good, a homeless beggar known for her ill temper and smoking habits; and Sarah Osborne, an elderly, impoverished woman who had transgressed social norms by cohabiting with her servant. These women were already outsiders, easy to believe, capable of evil in the eyes of the community. Their low social status made them convenient scapegoats, embodying the dark forces that the Puritans feared. The accusations, once made, gained immediate and terrifying legitimacy through the legal system. On March 1, 1692, formal complaints were filed, and magistrates Jonathan Corwin and John Hathorne, ancestor of author Nathaniel Hawthornet, began the initial examinations. These were not trials in the modern sense, but interrogations, designed to extract confessions. The magistrates, devout Puritans themselves, firmly believed in the reality of witchcraft and actively sought to confirm the girls' accusations. Their approach was more inquisitorial than judicial, setting a dangerous precedent for the subsequent proceedings. The examinations, often held in public and attended by large, agitated crowds, were highly theatrical and utterly terrifying. When Tituba, Sarah Good, or Sarah Osborne were questioned, the afflicted girls would fall into fits, screaming that they were being pinched or bitten by the specters of the accused. This phenomenon, known as spectral evidence, testimony about torments inflicted by the accused witch's spirit, was accepted as compelling proof. Under duress and brutal interrogation, and perhaps seeking to save herself, Tituba ultimately confessed to being a witch, providing lurid details of pacts with the devil, black magic, and other witches in the village. Her confession, though likely coerced, ignited the flames of hysteria, confirming the community's worst fears and opening the floodgates for a wave of even more devastating accusations. Tituba's confession, a chilling validation of the community's fears, unleashed a torrent of accusations that rapidly escalated beyond the village's social outcasts. The afflicted girls, now empowered by the magistrate's belief in their torment, began to name more prominent and respected members of Salem village and even Salem town. This marked a terrifying turning point. Suddenly, anyone could be a witch. Among the next wave of accused were Martha Corey and Rebecca Nurse. Martha Corey was a pious, respected church member known for her skepticism regarding the girls' accusations. Her doubt, in the eyes of the magistrates, was seen as evidence of her guilt, a sign that she was trying to undermine the devil's exposure. Rebecca Nurse, an elderly, ailing woman of impeccable reputation, was also accused. Her neighbors initially defended her, testifying to her good character, but the persistent fits of the afflicted girls ultimately swayed the court. Accusations against such upstanding members of the community sent shockwaves through the region, demonstrating that no one was safe. The legal proceedings were fundamentally flawed, lacking due process, and adhering to the highly questionable standards of evidence of the time. The magistrates, and later the Special Court of Oyer and Terminer, heavily relied on three main types of evidence: spectral evidence, the testimony of the afflicted girls, who claimed to see the accused spirit tormenting them; confessions, often extracted under extreme psychological pressure and physical duress; and physical evidence, such as witch marks, or teats, found on the accused's body, believed to be where a familiar spirit suckled. These marks were often nothing more than moles, warts, or other common skin blemishes, misinterpreted through a lens of fear. The establishment of the Court of Oyer and Terminer, meaning to hear and determine, by Governor William Phipps in May 1692, formally codified these problematic legal standards. Presided over by Chief Justice William Stoughton, a man known for his rigid Puritan orthodoxy and unshakable belief in the guilt of the accused, the court allowed practices that ensured convictions. Defense for the accused was minimal, lawyers were not allowed, and the accused were often prevented from cross-examining their accusers or presenting alibis. The proceedings became a self-fulfilling prophecy, designed not to find innocence, but to confirm guilt. The psychology of the accused during the trials was varied, but consistently devastating. Many steadfastly maintained their innocence, even in the face of certain death. Giles Corey, Martha's husband, famously refused to enter a plea, knowing that a trial would be rigged against him. He endured the horrific punishment of pain-forfeit jaw, being pressed to death with heavy stones, rather than allow his property to be confiscated, ensuring his heirs could inherit. Others, like Tituba, confessed, hoping to save their own lives, as confessing witches were rarely executed. These confessions, however, only fueled the hysteria, providing detailed secels and often fantastical accounts of satanic rituals, further validating the girls' accusations. The summer of 1692 saw the trials reach their brutal peak. In June, Bridget Bishop became the first person executed, hanged on Proctor's Ledge at Gallows Hill. Her execution opened the floodgates. By the end of September, 19 people had been hanged at Gallows Hill, all maintaining their innocence to the very end. 5 others, including Giles Corey, died in prison or during interrogation. The victims were a diverse group: men and women, young and old, wealthy and poor, though women and those on the social margins remained disproportionately targeted. Their deaths, rather than bringing peace, only deepened the terror, creating a pervasive sense of dread that gripped the entire colony. The relentless executions of the summer of 1692, rather than cleansing the community of evil, began to produce an unsettling sense of disquiet and profound doubt among some of the more influential members of Massachusetts Bay Colony. The sheer number of convictions, the steadfast denials of the accused, and the increasingly outlandish accusations began to challenge the previously unshakable belief in the proceedings. The initial religious fervor started to give way to a creeping sense of unease. A pivotal moment came with the growing skepticism from prominent ministers, particularly Increase Mather, president of Harvard College, and his son, Cotton Mather, a highly influential minister and intellectual. While both Mathers firmly believed in the reality of witchcraft, they became increasingly concerned about the judicial processes being employed. In October 1692, Increase Mather published Cases of Conscience Concerning Evil Spirits, a powerful treatise that argued emphatically against the use of spectral evidence in witchcraft trials. He famously declared, "It is better that 10 suspected witches escape than that one innocent person be condemned." This publication provided crucial theological and legal ammunition for those who doubted the trial's legitimacy. The spectral evidence itself became the most controversial and ultimately damaging aspect of the trials. Critics argued that the devil, being supremely cunning, could assume the shape of an innocent person to torment his victims, thus making spectral evidence unreliable and potentially condemning the truly innocent. If the devil could impersonate anyone, then the girl's visions proved nothing. This theological argument struck at the heart of the court's evidentiary foundation, exposing a fatal flaw in its logic. The integrity of the trials began to unravel under the weight of this logical dilemma. The wave of accusations also began to target increasingly prominent figures, crossing critical social boundaries. When the wife of Governor William Phips, Lady Mary Phips, was briefly implicated, and later, the minister of Andover, Reverend John Hale, found his own wife accused, the absurdity and danger of the trials became undeniable. These accusations against politically and socially powerful individuals forced the authorities to confront the horrifying possibility that they had condemned innocent people. The elite of the colony, once confident in their divine mission, now faced the prospect of their own destruction. In October 1692, facing mounting criticism and the undeniable escalation of unchecked hysteria, Governor William Phips, upon his return from defending the colony's borders, ordered a halt to the court of Oyer and Terminer. He subsequently forbade further arrests for witchcraft and outlawed the use of spectral evidence in future trials. This decisive action effectively dismantled the legal framework that had sustained the witch hunt, signaling a profound shift in official policy and a belated recognition of the deep injustices that had occurred. A new, more conventional court, the Superior Court of Judicature, was established in January 1693 to try the remaining accused. Without the allowance of spectral evidence, the convictions plummeted dramatically. Many of those who had previously been accused were now acquitted, and those still in prison were eventually released. The dark chapter of the Salem Witch Trials was slowly drawing to a close. But the scars left on the community and the collective memory of the innocent lives lost would linger for centuries. The tide of fear had receded, but the indelible marks of its passage remained. The immediate aftermath of the Salem Witch Trials was a period of profound shock, regret, and immense soul-searching for the Massachusetts Bay Colony. As the hysteria dissipated, the terrible realization of the injustice that had been inflicted upon innocent people began to set in. The community, once united in its fervent pursuit of the devil, now grappled with a collective trauma and a devastating moral reckoning. The silence that followed the trials was heavy with guilt and shame. The first official expressions of remorse came relatively quickly. In 1697, the Massachusetts General Court ordered a day of fasting and repentance for the tragedy of the trials. Judge Samuel Sewall, one of the presiding magistrates, publicly confessed his error and expressed deep contrition for his role in the convictions. Standing before his congregation, he issued a profound apology, acknowledging his guilt according to the best of his discernment. This act of public penance was a powerful symbol of the emerging shift in public consciousness, a move away from condemnation towards self-reflection. Over the next several years, the colonial government began the slow and arduous process of reparations and exonerations. In 1711, the General Court passed an act reversing the attainders, the forfeiture of land and civil rights, for those who had been accused. It also provided financial compensation to the families of the victims who had suffered losses due to the trials. This was a crucial step, restoring the good names of the condemned and offering some small measure of material relief to their wronged families, though nothing could truly compensate for the lives lost. However, full and official exoneration for all victims took much longer. Some individuals were not officially cleared until the 20th century, a testament to the lingering complexities and historical oversight. It wasn't until 2001 that the last 5 victims, whose names had previously been omitted from official exoneration lists, were finally cleared by the Massachusetts legislature. This final act brought a long, overdue sense of legal closure, acknowledging the profound and systemic injustice that had occurred centuries earlier. The historical understanding of the trials has also evolved significantly. Early historians often focused on the religious extremism and the role of superstition. More recent scholarship has delved deeper into the complex socio-economic, psychological, and environmental factors that contributed to the outbreak. Historians now emphasize the internal factionalism within Salem Village, the lingering effects of frontier warfare, the gender dynamics of Puritan society, and even potential physiological factors like disease or food poisoning, providing a more nuanced, multifaceted understanding of the catastrophe. The Salem Witch Trials serve as a profound and enduring cautionary tale for future generations. They stand as a stark warning against the dangers of religious extremism, unchecked mass hysteria, the abuse of judicial power, and the destructive consequences of allowing fear and superstition to override reason and due process. The story of Salem reminds us of the fragility of justice and the terrifying ease with which a community can be swept into a destructive wave of irrationality, leading to the persecution and condemnation of its own members. The victims of Salem, once demonized, are now remembered as innocent martyrs to a dark chapter in American history. Over 3 centuries have passed since the last condemned witch was released from a Massachusetts prison. Yet, The story of the Salem Witch Trials continues to resonate with powerful and unsettling relevance in the modern world. It is not merely a historical curiosity, but a vivid, visceral parable that offers timeless lessons about human nature, societal vulnerability, and the enduring struggle against intolerance and irrationality. One of the most powerful lessons from Salem is the danger of mass hysteria and collective delusion. The trials demonstrate how quickly fear, once ignited, can spread through a community, clouding judgment and leading to actions that, in hindsight, appear utterly unthinkable. In our own era, where misinformation can spread globally in an instant, the Salem story serves as a stark reminder of how easily groupthink can override individual reason, leading to the persecution of perceived others or enemies, whether political, social, or ideological. The trials also highlight the perilous consequences of unchecked judicial power and the erosion of due process. When legal systems abandon established safeguards, such as the right to counsel, the right to confront accusers, and the demand for concrete evidence, they become tools of oppression rather than instruments of justice. The acceptance of spectral evidence in Salem stands as a chilling example of how easily legal procedures can be corrupted by fear and prejudice, leading to the condemnation of the innocent and the dismantling of fundamental rights. Furthermore, the Salem Witch Trials remain a profound study in scapegoating and the targeting of marginalized groups. The first accused were outsiders: an enslaved woman, a beggar, an elderly woman who defied social norms. As the hysteria grew, those who were different, those who expressed doubt, or those who simply found themselves on the wrong side of local disputes became easy targets. This pattern of identifying and persecuting witches, or any perceived enemy, is a recurring, insidious theme throughout history, a constant warning against the dangers of demonizing minority groups or dissenting voices. The psychological dimension of the trials continues to fascinate. The role of the afflicted girls, their genuine belief in their torments, and the potential for suggestion, manipulation, or even genuine trauma to manifest in their symptoms remains a complex subject. Their accusations, whether deliberate fabrications or deeply held delusions, serve as a stark reminder of the power of belief, especially within a highly suggestible and fearful environment. The question of their true motives, or the genesis of their afflictions, is a lasting puzzle within the larger mystery. Finally, the legacy of Salem has profoundly shaped the American legal system's commitment to due process and the separation of church and state. The memory of the trials fostered a deep-seated suspicion of state-sanctioned religious zealotry and a heightened awareness of the need for robust legal protections to prevent similar abuses. While imperfect, the American legal system was forged, in part, in the crucible of Salem, emerging with a stronger commitment to protecting individual rights against the tyranny of the majority or the fervor of collective fear. The Salem Witch Trials, therefore, are far more than a dark historical footnote. They are a living, breathing testament to the profound vulnerabilities of human society. They compel us to continually examine our own biases, to question authority, and to champion critical thinking and compassion in the face of fear. The echoes of Salem remain, a timeless reminder that the fight against intolerance and irrationality is an eternal one, demanding vigilance from every generation. Beyond the widely acknowledged social, religious, and judicial factors, some historians and scientists have explored less conventional, yet compelling, Theories to explain the outbreak of the Salem Witch Trials, particularly focusing on environmental and medical influences. These perspectives offer a more physiological lens through which to view the strange afflictions that first sparked the hysteria, suggesting that natural phenomena might have inadvertently exacerbated a volatile social situation. One of the most persistent and debated scientific theories attributes the girls' symptoms to ergot poisoning. Ergot is a fungus that commonly grows on rye, a staple grain in 17th century New England. Ingesting ergot, contaminated rye, can cause a condition known as ergotism, or St. Anthony's fire. Symptoms include convulsions, muscle spasms, hallucinations, delusions, and a crawling sensation on the skin, remarkably similar to the afflictions described by the Salem girls. The climatic conditions in Salem in 1692, with warm, wet summers, would have been conducive to ergot growth. The specific dietary habits of the villagers, with many relying on rye bread, further support this intriguing possibility. Another environmental factor often considered is the impact of disease or malnutrition. The lives of Puritan colonists were physically demanding, often marked by poor sanitation, limited medical knowledge, and insufficient diets, especially during harsh winters. Such conditions could have made individuals, particularly young girls, more susceptible to a range of illnesses that could manifest in neurological symptoms, fevers, or behavioral changes. Mass psychogenic illness, where psychological stress manifests in physical symptoms in a group, is also a consideration, although it doesn't preclude an underlying physiological trigger. The geographic isolation of Salem Village, combined with its unique ecosystem, might also have played a role. The village was surrounded by vast tracts of untamed wilderness, full of swamps and forests. This isolation, while fostering a strong sense of community, also heightened the colonists' anxieties about the unknown and the devil's domain beyond their cultivated lands. Exposure to specific plant toxins, insect-borne diseases, or even chronic heavy metal poisoning due to primitive cooking vessels or water sources are speculative, but not entirely dismissed. Possibilities that could have induced unusual symptoms. Furthermore, the general health of the Puritan population was often precarious. Life expectancy was lower, infant mortality was high, and many suffered from chronic pain or lingering effects of past illnesses. The constant fear of death, coupled with a lack of understanding of bodily ailments, could have predisposed the population to interpret any unusual physical or mental affliction through a supernatural lens. A child's sudden illness was not a virus, it was a curse. While no single medical or environmental factor can definitively explain the entirety of the Salem Witch Trials, the social and religious factors were undeniably paramount. These scientific theories offer crucial insights into the initial spark of the afflictions. They suggest that what began as genuinely disturbing physical symptoms, perhaps rooted in a natural cause, were then interpreted through a rigid Puritan worldview, amplified by existing social tensions, and ultimately spiraled into a catastrophic legal and moral disaster. The combination of a fragile human physiology, a volatile environment, and a deeply superstitious society created a unique and tragic crucible. The unseen influences of nature, interpreted through a lens of profound fear, may well have provided the initial kindling for the inferno that consumed Salem. The Salem Witch Trials, though a brief and localized episode in colonial history, cast a long and indelible shadow across the American consciousness. Its legacy extends far beyond the quiet village in Massachusetts, serving as a permanent, chilling warning that resonates through the centuries, speaking to the timeless fragility of human justice and the enduring power of fear. The most profound legacy of Salem is its role as a foundational cautionary tale against religious intolerance and the persecution of minority groups. The phrase, witch hunt, has entered our lexicon as a metaphor for baseless accusations, mass hysteria, and the targeting of political or social enemies. It reminds us that zealotry, whether religious, political, or ideological, can quickly spiral into tyranny when unchecked by reason, compassion, and established legal safeguards. Salem also profoundly influenced the development of American legal thought. The horrific miscarriage of justice exposed the critical need for strict rules of evidence, the right to legal counsel, and the presumption of innocence, principles that became cornerstones of the U.S. Constitution and its Bill of Rights. The memory of spectral evidence, confessions extracted under duress, and trials without proper defense spurred a deep-seated commitment to due process that continues to shape legal debates today. The trials left an indelible mark on American literature and culture. Nathaniel Hawthorne, a direct descendant of Judge John Hathorne, wrestled with his family's dark legacy in works like The Scarlet Letter, exploring themes of sin, guilt, and the repressive nature of Puritan society. Arthur Miller's The Crucible, written during the McCarthy era, drew direct parallels between the witch trials and the anti-communist paranoia of the 1950s, solidifying Salem's relevance as a commentary on contemporary political anxieties. Furthermore, Salem's legacy forces us to grapple with the complexities of historical memory and reconciliation. The slow, painful process of exoneration and the establishment of memorials speak to the long journey societies must undertake to confront past injustices. It underscores the importance of remembering victims, not as condemned witches, but as innocent individuals who suffered under the weight of a collective delusion, ensuring their sacrifice serves as a perpetual lesson for future generations. In the 21st century, as our world grapples with digital misinformation, cancel culture, and renewed social and political polarizations, the echoes of Salem are perhaps more potent than ever. It compels us to question our assumptions, to challenge popular narratives, and to defend the rights of the accused and the marginalized against the passions of the crowd. The temptation to find easy answers, to demonize difference, and to succumb to fear remains a constant human weakness. The Salem Witch Trials serve as a timeless testament to the darkness that can emerge when faith becomes fanaticism, when fear eclipses reason, and when justice succumbs to hysteria. It is a story that refuses to be forgotten, forever standing as a stark and powerful warning from America's past, urging vigilance and empathy in every age. The ghosts of Salem continue to speak, reminding us that the fight for reason and compassion is an eternal one.